Hey everyone, it's Nixie, and today I want to talk to you about the new legendary equipment, Ironsong Versus, and my thoughts about the equipment after doing some testing on Teleshar with it. I hope to answer the question everyone has on their mind: does it replace our trusty Braveforge Bracers, or is it just straight dumpster tier like Merciless Axe was, and should never be used? Or is it a sideboard option like Van Brace of Determination was to help in certain matchups? To answer those questions, let's first look at the defensive capabilities on Versus because that is something everyone points out immediately when comparing to the Braveforge. So Versus has Temper 2, unlike Braveforge's Battle Worn 2. Now a lot of people just look at this and write off Versus because Battle Worn 2 is so much better than Temper 2, right? But is it though? Battle Worn 2 allows us to block for 2 and then block for 1 for a total of 3 block over the course of the game. Versus with Temper 2 allows us to still block for 2 and have 1 emergency block to stop some nasty on hits, or save us from lethal to then block for a total of 3 block, same as our Braveforge. It's just that it breaks when it is blocked the second time, so we just need to be very careful when we utilize that block for the second time. Maybe you would use Versus second block hopefully near endgame situations because that's when you're forced to. And then it breaks, right? But if you think about it, we're not regularly activating Braveforge at endgame situations because at that point maybe both of you and your opponent is sub 10 health and you're stripping cards from each other so you don't die or get too low. So you can't swing twice most of the time anyway. And then if you're holding onto cards to really go tall for that kill and try to kill them with reacts, right? You're not gonna be swinging twice. But maybe if you do swing twice, you don't have the resources to pump with the Braveforge Bracers because you used it up to barely go over the top. So you're just saving that one last resource to swing second time. Only time Temper will be very punishing is against Dash, who T-bones you multiple times and we lose it early, or Assassins who can shred it to break it. But other than those situations, it isn't that bad. And if you compare Versus to like Van Brace of Determination, which was a nice sideboard option for us, Versus's defensive capabilities is much better than Van Brace. Van Brace is a 0 block with Blade Break, and you had to pay 1 to make it block for 1. So you could only use it once. And he has to pay. So this makes Van Brace not really good defensively, but why was it even our sideboard if it wasn't that good of a defensive card or equipment? That's because its activated ability was so good into the meta hero Odin, which made it a key card in that specific matchup. It did things that Braveforge Bracers could not do, which was help mitigate that crown damage prevention effect, which they used a lot, so you get that free damage in. And also, you could play it on the reaction step to not break the combat chain and allow Oldham to use the shield again. So, defensive capabilities should not be the main thing we look at to evaluate if we use this equipment or not. The ability it has is the most important thing that we should look at for evaluation to if we use it. So, does Versus have an amazing activated ability that surpasses the utility of Braveforge? Well, let's look at it. Versus' ability reads, once per turn, action, pay 1. Your next sword attack this turn gets, when this hits a hero, create a courage token, go again. And then courage token says, when you play an attack action card or activate a weapon attack, destroy this and the attack gets +1. So at first glance it sounds very similar to Braveforge, where both require 1 resource and an action point to activate. Then your weapon attack needs to hit to get that +1 on your next attack. But if you look closer, there are a few key things that make Versus ability very different from Braveforge. Some for worse and some for better. But let's look at the negative stuff first to get that out of the way. The first thing I want to point out is Versus requires a sword attack instead of a weapon attack, meaning we can only use Versus on Dawnblade and Sabers at the moment. Not the worst, but would have been nice to have the flexibility to use with their other weapons. The second thing is Versus specifies when this hits a hero instead of when this hits anything. So we can't get +1 courage token from activating Versus and hitting an ally. Which is not great because when we play against ally-based heroes like Joromai, the Braveforge ability is used quite often. We can swing at a dragon with the weapon Go Again, then pump with Bracers, then swing at a 4th health dragon to kill it and get a counter, or swing at Joromai herself with a breakpoint of 4 attack, which requires 2 cards to block or a D react to block out. The last thing is a big one, which is that this requires you to pay the 1 resource up front to have the Versus ability active. Meaning we have 1 less resource to play with when we swing. So activating Versus on the initial swing makes things really hard on us because in certain matchups we struggle to even get that first swing to even hit, even with all the resources we have. So losing out 1 resource by activating Versus means not only do we have less resources for us to play with during reaction phase, but also the opponent can kind of predict what we have in our hand easier, so it makes it even harder to get that hit in. For example, let's say we play a Valor, pitching a blue, activate Versus, and swing. So now we have no resources remaining, and let's say we have 2 cards left in hand. Here the opponent can block 9 comfortably because most of the time what we'll have in hand is a 1 cost 3 pump. And what if, maybe you have a bigger pump like Overpower? So even with that, you have to pitch a whole card to play it, which is a blue. And then once it hits, great, we get a courage. But now we don't have resources left to swing a second time. So now we lose out on the second swing damage and a threat of a counter, which if we didn't activate Versus, we had that 1 resource to swing. So yeah, that sounds pretty bad. Okay, so how about instead of using Versus on the first swing, we use the ability on the second swing, similar to what we do with Bracers right now. But that means the second swing doesn't have the +1 active on it, right? So it comes in for just 3 damage most of the time. Unless you pump it with something else, with Sharpened Steel or Hit and Run. So just coming in for 3 is so much easier to block than with Braveforge activated that was coming for 4, which made it hard for them to commit to because they had to at least block with 2 cards or D-react to block it out completely. And if they do successfully block out our second swing with the Versus active, we not only lose out on getting that courage token from Versus, but also counter on our Dawn Blade. So we're banking everything on the second Dawn Blade to hit, which is not great. So yeah, those are some pretty big losses, but not everything is bad. Let's look at the cool positive things Versus enables us to do that Braveforge can't do. One neat thing is that Courage Token is an aura that doesn't pop at the beginning of turn, similar to a Quicken Token. So that means we can set up with this token. So for example, we can take a turn to get a Courage Token. The next turn, we draw back up, and maybe our hand just sucks. We can't be offensive with it. It's a lot of defensive cards. So we decide to now we could just block with it, and then maybe instead of just swinging, we set up another card like an E-Pot or Arsenal card, because we didn't have an Arsenal, without popping the Courage Token. So it just sits around. Then on the following turn, we then draw a really nice hand, so we decide not to block, and then we attack with a full hand and an Arsenal with the +1 active. That's pretty nice, right? Having that +1 just last longer or choosing when to use it is very nice. We can also stack the Courage Token by, let's say, getting it with the Versus. Then next turn you find a Chorus of Ironsong in your hand, so you block with that and 1 more card to activate the Unity effect, which generates another Courage Token, and then you attack with a +2 buff. Notice I said buff because this buff can be applied to the weapon or attack action card you play, similar to how the Quicken Token works, where it gives Go Again to the weapon attack or attack action card. So a cool thing you could do is with the Courage Token, you get it from Versus, you draw back up, and then you block for 6 or so, and then you come in with a CNC not for 6, but for 7. And 7 is a nice breakpoint because now that forces them to block with 3 cards, maybe 2 cards and equipment or something. Or, they just take it because they don't feel like losing 3 cards and losing tempo. But they're already going to lose tempo if they have Arsenal. So, yeah, this allows us to shift the pace back in our favor, which is really neat. The last good thing is that we can activate this on the first weapon swing. I know I made it sound pretty bad to activate on the first swing, but that's because we were really trying to swing twice against an opponent that might not easily let us, like Guardians. But what if we are not trying to swing twice that turn, just swinging a naked downblade for 3? Normally, the opponent will just look at you and say, pass on blocks, wait for you to play a react like Glint, so then they can laugh in your face with a D-react to cover it up and you lose value on your Glint. Or you don't react at all and you just do 3 damage. So naked downblades were never scary and didn't force opponents to block because they didn't want to turn on reprise anyway, right? So that's where Versus comes in and really makes an impact. Having Versus active on the first swing forces the opponent in a tough spot. Either they block it, or we get free value for the next attack, be a second swing that turn because we gotta go again, or we attack the next turn. So that means Versus is really good in some matches where we don't expect to swing 2 times a turn that often. So mid-range to control matchups. So the play pattern with Versus looks like this. You just block for 6 to 9, then on your turn, pitch a yellow or blue, activate Versus, and swing downblade. They will block it with a card from hand, which makes their following turn weaker, or waste a D-react on it, which is great because it will make your endgame easier since they don't have D-reacts left for that endgame when you have all your power cards left. Or they let it hit and you just get free value out of it in the future, so technically it's a 1 for 4. So let's see what matchups we want to use this Versus for. These matchups are again games where we are playing more defensive and waiting for opportunities to strike. So we have Bravo, that we know most of the time you won't be able to activate Bracers because they're very defensive. You're not going to be getting hits in. So this is very nice when you just swing a naked downblade at them with Versus active. And also for my testing, it's very nice into Vincent, where I like to take a more control approach and slow approach where instead of racing them, I just pitch my blues for rune chance and block out their 6 or 7 attacks and then just wait. And then just swing back for Versus active, and then they just have to either block and lose a card, so they have now less cards to work with when they banish a card, or again they let it hit and I get free value. It's also good into the mirror because I like to play Shunt and Oasis in that matchup, and then it's also good into Raiden Bolton because we could just stall them out a bit. But let's talk about now what could be useful in certain matchups, but I'm not 100% sure yet. Things like Katsu and Reinar could be good into that matchup because you're going for a more mid-range and blocking approach by just stopping their nasty on hits. So yeah, it could be good there, but not sure. Maybe for your build that you're trying out in Dory, you want to be more aggressive, then you might not want to use Versus in that case. But for me, I will use it against Katsu and Reinar. You could also use it into Assassins because that's a long and control-y matchup as well. You just have to be very careful not to get it shredded and just get it broken, because that'll be very sad. And then we have matchups you don't want to use it on. First one is ones that we are just racing because we need that one extra block that we get from Braveforge without it breaking to stop the nasty on hits. Or we need the Braveforge effect to swing for a breakpoint to make blocking harder. So these matchups are the Rangers, Lexi Azalea, Levia, Phi, Runeblade, Briar, and Viserai, Dash, and Prism. We also don't want to use it against Wizards, Icelander, and Kano because we don't want to waste a resource on it up front. if you don't have to, right? You just want to just swing at them, make them block first. We also don't want to use it against Dromai because Versus effect doesn't work on allies, so it's not great there. And then we also don't want to use it against Riptide because we always want to be swinging with the naked Dawnblade for 3 to not trigger any of his traps from outsiders. Alright, so that's all the matchups. As you can see, Versus can be good into a decent number of heroes, but still not good into everyone. So from my point of view, it is not enough to replace our good old Bracers, but a good sideboard option. And since Odom's gone, that was what Vambrace was for, so I'll be replacing Vambrace for Versus in my builds. Unless we need it for Prism, but I sure hope not. I hope that she's bad. Stupid Arc-like Sentinels. Alright, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching, and hope everyone has fun with the new set. Bye!